And amazingly, it continues on now. How many of you are here at this Elvis Week celebration for the very first time? Welcome to the family. Now, like all families, we've got interesting people. Not gonna lie, not gonna lie. It's not mandatory that if you're in a group you wear matching t-shirts, but it seems to be a thing in our family. Doesn't matter if you like the 50s Elvis, or the movies 60s Elvis, or the black leather Elvis, or the 70s Elvis. It's okay. I mean, we know the 70s is the best, but still, we all have our favorite, right? The way I look at it is Elvis is this train that's been steaming down the mountain, and all of us jump on at different places. But we're all going to the same place. Well, really, we don't know where we're going. Elvis is driving. There's absolutely no idea where we're going. We're gonna continue on with our discussion about the 68 comeback special with a guy that, again, I'm such a fan of television and movies. I mean, I worked this is my 43rd year in broadcasting, even though I know it doesn't look like it. But I grew up, I was doing homework in the 60s and 70s, trying to do homework for school, watching television in the afternoon and at night, watching all these shows that a lot of the people that I've met over the years were working on. And that homework was more important than what I was doing on the paper. And you'd know that if you saw my handwriting. Now, if you happen to own the album for the 1968 special, on the very back are some credits, and it says, directed by Steve Bender, written by Chris Beard and Alan Bly, music director Billy Goldenberg, God bless him, and under art director, it's got the next gentleman. And I started looking at his career, and he was one of those people I was watching. I was watching his work on television, on the Dean Martin Show, and all the great shows of the 60s and 70s. Let's bring out the art director and find out about the look of the 68 special, Gene McAvoy. Gene McAvoy. Sonny and Cher, Andy Williams, the Monkees. Gene, so good to see you. How are you, my friend? Good. We got on the phone a week or so ago and started talking, and I think it was 30 minutes before we mentioned Elvis, because I was bringing up all these different things that you had worked on. But we're here to talk about the 68 special, and just tell me about how you got the job. Steve Bender's kind of the guy that gets hired as the director. When did you jump on the train, as we talked about?
We did, Elvis was the...
Hold that up just a little.
Elvis was the third show we did together as a group. So everyone who did the show knew each other very well and liked each other. Mm-hmm. And so we had no trouble talking to one another whenever we had to. It was very enjoyable to work on.
Now for you, in this, Chris is dealing with Colonel and Elvis. Steve is dealing with Colonel and Elvis. Chris and Alan are trying to figure out what the story of the show is going to be. What is the process of an art director?
Well, the process, I did most of my things through Steve. Mm-hmm. Steve would have the meetings with the writers, and so on and so forth. And then he would come to me and tell me what they would like and what they thought. Mm-hmm. And then it was my decision on how I did those things.
Okay.
Many times they would say, like for instance, when we were doing the 80s, the 80 Elvises, they wanted me to watch Jailhouse Rock. Mm-hmm. Because obviously it was done similar.
Yeah.
But I never watched it, and I said, I'm not going to watch it. They said, well, why? Why not watch it? And I said, because it's been done. Mm. And I didn't want to watch something that had already been done, because I thought it was, like Elvis in many ways, I didn't want to copy anybody else.
Yeah. Let's, Gene, we've got right down here, let's see that first photo we have, which is a shot of Gene on the right, and on the left, that's the lighting director, John Frschetti, right?
Oh, to have those days back.
Yeah.
This photo shows one morning when Elvis showed up in the studio early in the morning, and to our surprise, he was standing over in the corner. I hadn't met him before because I didn't go to any of those meetings with him, and I thought, well, maybe I better go over and talk, explain who I was and so on and so forth, and talk to him, because he seemed to want to talk to people, but he was just standing there. So John and I both went over, introduced ourselves to him, and started talking. And I realized at that time he was very conscious of both these scenes that we were doing involved a lot of dancing. The choreography had to surround him, and I think he was very conscious of knowing how that was going to occur and what it entailed and everything. And we tried to explain to him as much as we knew, because a lot of times these shows happen so fast that you really never get a chance to see all the rehearsals. And that's the way television is, and you realize that's why it's so important to have a group of people who are wonderful, because they're the ones who tell you what's going on.
Right.
Otherwise, there's so many people involved in it that you don't get a chance to hear everything. Yeah. And with us, we were so good with each other that everybody heard everything. So it was a great way to work, and the best way to work, because if you don't have that kind of adherence on a television show, the show never turns out any good.
Yeah. Let's take a look. Go to this next slide. Here's what we know about the guys in the guitar boxes. That's the image that we had at home. And you told me an interesting story about walking by one day and seeing the choreographer working with the Elvis guitar players.
Yeah, we had not seen the rehearsals of this particular scene, because you're talking about 80 people, and at that time I think they were being paid $50 an hour to work, or whatever it was, and so hiring 80 people for the duration of the show would cost a lot of money, and almost impossible. So instead of doing that, they were hired, right the day before we did the show, and the choreographer had to choreograph them all and things like that. But prior to that, we decided that this structure that was built, we had to chain it off to the ceiling so that it would be stable, because we didn't, so many people on it. And if you look at it, there's no big X's in the back of each thing, or nothing going triangular across it, which means there's no bracing that way. It's braced up and down, and it's not. And we're talking something 24 foot high and 60 foot wide.
Wow.
And 80 fellas in it. Well, anyway, when we finally saw the rehearsal and everything, we had already changed it all, but when we saw the rehearsal, we realized 80 people moving in one direction was not a good idea. And so we had to take everybody off of it, put them on the stage again, and the choreographer had to re-choreograph the whole scene with everybody going each section, each broke into sections. Each section had to move in a different direction. So if you see the live performance in the show, you'll see that they're all moving in different directions. And but that's what it took. And thank God we did it, because I wouldn't be here talking to you. And the special would have never been finished.
Yeah. it would have been part of TV history. He told me that we were talking about it, and I said it reminds me of what I read, that when soldiers are marching, when they get to a bridge, they get out of step because soldiers marching across a bridge could bring it down, just that rhythmic pounding. What gets me about that image of the guitar players and Elvis is how it started. And you gave us some imagery of your sketches, of your concept of what you wanted it to look like. So we all know what it looked like there with Elvis and all the guitar players, but here was what was in his mind. Take a look at this sketch. That's what he saw. And I love this at the bottom. So the show, as Alan has told us, is morphing as they're looking at it, as they're producing it. At this time, you must have envisioned this as the closing of the show.
Well, the problem, it was really 4 sets in one.
Yeah.
That was used to support the Elvis letters. You know, that you just see the red letters.
Yeah.
Elvis. And that was used. This was used also for the gospel section. It was all broken up into pieces and put together as a gospel. And so it actually, I had to think of 4 different things at once to do this with this.
So, multi-use, yeah.
And that's basically why the structure was the way it was too, because it was designed to work in 4 different places during the show. Everyone thinks probably that there's a lot of money in television, but at that time there was very little, and budgets were, you know, you had to adhere to a budget whether you liked it or not. I decided at the beginning of the show that I didn't want to do any of the show real. All of the scenes that you see were all hand drawn, and then they were taken and cut out of plywood. Mm-hmm. All of the scenes were cut out of plywood and all put together as a scene. But there wasn't anything in it except for maybe a garbage can or a box that was real. Everything was created from scratch. And fortunately, today with the enhancement and the job that these people have done here, it's wonderful because it made it much better than it was in '68.
Yeah. I asked Alan about this, did you get any feeling, being around Elvis, that there was as much pressure on him as there must have been, and where he was in his career, and how important this special was to the next phase?
Well, I didn't really feel that, but I did during that opening, you know, the opening thing when he came when we didn't have an audience.
Yeah.
I did feel when he first came in, he was a little leery of what was going to happen, and that's the first time I saw him. Other than when he was doing the Pierre thing and those things, which he was, obviously something was going on mentally. He never mentioned it, he never acted. But during that time when he did the thing with his fellas in the round,
yeah.
You could see in the beginning when he walked in that he wasn't sure how that was.
That was his first time in front of people.
Yeah,
like 8 years, an audience. You know,
yeah,
and all that time.
It was, but you could see the change in him.
Yeah, as soon as it. Yeah.
Once you realized that all those gals, the young gals that were around him, were very attentive.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that set.
That would turn anybody on.
Well, yeah. Look right here. Look right there. That's my request. I put that whole row together. Tell me about that set. I've always called it like almost like a boxing ring with no ropes. Was that your design?
It was designed for that reason. It was because Elvis was the kind of person who kind of pranced around when he sang. He moved.
Yeah.
So we decided that. I don't know who decided it. I can't remember that. But we decided it would be nice to have him in the middle of an audience with an arena of his own, that he could kind of prance around, because we felt like, well, it almost was like having a caged animal.
Yeah.
With no cage.
Yeah, exactly. Dangerous. Dangerous. Oh.
And that's how we thought about it.
Well, that was a pretty good choice.
Because everybody on the show had the same thought in mind. That all they wanted to do was to have him back with a live audience. You know, because we knew that was the whole thing that was missing from his life.
Yeah.
At that point.
That's how important that was for that next
we
phase.
didn't even know how he thought about that. At least I didn't, because the producers and the writers knew, because they had more of a contact with him. But it was very important to him.
You guys shot in June, July of '68. The special comes on in December, and by July of '69, he's opening in Vegas, back in front of a live audience. This is kind of the beginning of the lighting of the rocket. Let's take a look. There's another comment you had. Now, this next image, of course, from the closing of the show, and it's a combination of the song that he sings, the outfit that he's wearing, but one of the most iconic sets ever, standing in front of your own name.
Well, the funny part about this is that I had worked as an assistant art director on Judy Garland's show in 19. In fact, that's why I originally moved to California. And one of the suggestions, I don't know where it came from, was, oh, maybe we should do his name and lights. Well, it was a great suggestion, except I really wanted to think of how to do it so it would look masculine, other than what Judy has. And so that's how the red and the lights came along, and the fact that it was that big and that. Anybody else in front, I must tell you, anybody else in front of that set would look foolish. Elvis, anything that I did, Elvis could pull it off.
Yeah.
You know, so, and I wish I knew that even more at that point, because I probably would have been a little more outlandish.
Yeah. Well, you have created one of the great specials in the look and the feel of the art direction. And I don't know if you can see it. On stage during the tribute artist events, they have the Elvis letters. Can you bring House up for just a second? House lights? Because I wanted Gene to see what's right over there on that wall to the right. Take a look over here. Yeah. So
it's a little smaller.
Spoken like a true art director. Gene McAvoy, thank you for your work on the 68. Sure. One more thing.
I have one more thing to say about you guys. Are a terrific audience. I've never seen so many happy people in my life.